Okay, last album then. Something a
Do you
little
want me
different.
to jump in on it?
Yeah, you go for it.
So it's Take It or Leave It by CHERYM. So this was released on the 10th of February this year on Alcopop Records. There's 10 songs and it's just over 30 minutes long. So it's not a particularly long album. It's the band's long-awaited debut album, which they're currently promoting at the moment. They've had a tour of the UK and Ireland. Recently played the Hug and Pint in Glasgow on the 21st of February. Quite gutted that I didn't know about that gig in hindsight. The band themselves are a three-piece pop-punk band who hail from Derry in Ireland. Influences include the likes of Charlie Bliss, Bikini Kill, Slotface, Pup and the Pixies. In an interview that they did with Music News Web, which I found online, they described how their music encompasses all sorts of genres, from country to heavy metal. They described their sound as being like fizzy pop rocks, and you can immediately hear that kind of pop-punk influence in the opening track, which is a banger straight off the mark. Alpha, Beta, Sigma. It reminds me of kind of old school Tsunami Bomb, stuff from kind of Hellcat Records. In that same interview from Music News Webs, they kind of discussed how their first EP, Hey Tory, felt very much like an introduction to them and their sound, whereas their debut album is very much introduces their listeners to them as people and their experiences, and it's far more politically charged. Hey Tory is a fantastic EP. It was released in October 2021, and I kind of get where they're coming from, having kind of listened to them both. There's some really good tracks on that EP. Listen to My Head is a standout track. There's just something about the inflection that the lead vocalist puts on the lyrics in the chorus that I find really infectious. Gone Girl is a really interesting track as well, and that's kind of definitely worth listening to. But Alpha Beta Sigma, as I said, the kind of first track in this album opens with a kind of really punchy, energetic guitar riff and a driving drum beat. The song itself kind of deals with this idea of toxic masculinity, the kind of Sigma incel male mindset, and kind of draws attention to notorious internet celebrities like Andrew Tate, with the lyrics saying that the internet is your church and Tate is your saviour. There's some really good kind of gang vocals on the chorus, which I felt was a huge high point. It's just dead infectious and something that you'll be singing for days, if not kind of weeks on end.
Yeah, it feels like an assassination of like incels and toxic.
That's a brilliant
culture. Like the way that it's delivered. It's it's got this rolling bass, it's got this buzzing static, and it bursts into these catchy bouncing riffs and angry but melodic feminine vocals, and it sounds like classic noughties pop punk in the instrumentation and the melodies.
Absolutely.
But it's got this kind of lyrical subject matter that's bad up to date. I
just listened to a podcast this morning, actually. It was Richard Herring of, what's it called again? Richard Not Judy. Remember they used to do
This Morning with Richard Not Judy, yeah.
That's it. This Morning Richard Not Judy. And he had Sarah Pascoe on, and she is they're doing a book review, and I think she just released a novel called Weirdo, and where they kind of deal with stuff like this. And they were kind of talking about how, there's people out there who we may know them who kind of hold some of the same views that kind of Andrew Tate have, and they can be fairly passable human beings. You know what I mean? Like they don't come across as nutters straight off the mark. But if you kind of wait about long enough and kind of scratch under the surface a wee bit, they'll come out with some pretty interesting things. Like I remember me and Kerry were watching that. I can't remember if it was a documentary on Andrew Tate or if he was featured on something, and he's just kind of sitting, and he's sitting ludicrous, he's got like this big stogie, and he takes a big draw from the stogie, and he's like, women are barely sentient, and you're like, the fuck's your game?
Yeah,
like,
I've seen that scene,
and it's not I don't think it's done in a tongue-in-cheek way, it's not like women know your limits, Harry Enfield and Chums rubbish, it's the guy's bonkers, but there's I don't understand it. But anyways, I'm going off on a tangent.
No, but I mean, it's right to talk about it. It's the sort of thing that's covered in the lyrics here. So,
I
mean, CHERYM they are essentially pop punk in the vein of, the sort of classic 90s and 90s bands that we grew up with, like stuff like Sum 41 or Newfound Glory or Lit or Bowling for Soup, like those kind of bands. But I think it's not just kind of sugary adolescent rubbish. I think the fact it's got that modern outlook to the lyrics, and there's plenty of kind of harder, punkier elements in the instrumentation too that make this worthwhile. And I think there's elements of the Linda Lindas in there that we've covered, and
definitely,
and Olivia Rodrigo as well.
Yeah,
yeah, I absolutely love Taking Up Sports. It's the third track.
It's a great track.
And I think it was earlier in the week. I was walking to work in the morning. I was like, I want to put on a song to kind of lift my spirits on the way to work. So I put on Taking Up Sports, and I absolutely love it. It reminds me of, I've just mentioned the Linda Lindas. It partly reminds me of them. It reminds me of the song Jessie's Girl by Rick Springfield, or indeed Jessie's Girl 2 by Coheed and Cambria, featuring Rick Springfield. It's just superb. It's unbelievably catchy, super melodic. It's a thumping punk rock song. I love the story and the lyrics as well. It's essentially a girl who has a crush on this girl on the football team. You know, it's humorous. The chorus, which goes, "Baby, when I see you in those shorts, you have got my head doing all sorts." It's just brilliant songwriting.
Even the inclusion of that, you know, old kind of football chant, "Ole, ole, ole." It's like, exactly, that's fucking ace. Like, that's fucking ace. It's interesting you mentioned Linda Lindas, because that's exactly what I had down for this track as well. The vocals on this album are like top drawer stuff. Like, the vocal harmonies in particular are just brilliant. Like, they're just executed really, really well. And as you said, I would completely agree with you. You know what I mean? Like, it is very reminiscent of, you know, the kind of pop punk that we grew up with, to the point where even like they obviously kind of, it's almost like they use kind of devices and tropes that we're kind of familiar with. Like, for example, that kind of the thing about them, which is the kind of second track in the album, like that ends, like those vocal harmonies that song ends on immediately put me in mind of like a kind of Blink-182 track. But as you said, it's not just, you know, sugar syrupy pop punk rubbish. You know what I mean? They're dealing with proper and important kind of issues. And I would say, like, the thing about them, I kind of felt as if it was a kind of brilliant track. It kind of opens with this kind of rumbling bass, accompanied by a kind of spectral, ethereal guitar riff that almost, for my money, sounded as if it was like a kind of, it's almost like a taunting kind of playground taunt. Like, it felt, I don't know how to describe it. It felt like the equivalent of doing this. Like, and I think that's possibly deliberate given the subject matter, because it's about it kind of identifying as being kind of non-binary and people being largely ignorant or willingly belligerent of that fact. And this kind of this song kind of feels very much like a kind of declaration of intent with the lyric, "I don't want to wait for you to calculate, I'm non-binary." It's like, I'm fucking telling you, you know what I mean? I'm not waiting about for you to, you know, get it into your head. And that bridge, how many times do you have to say it before you get it? It's them, which kind of ramps up intensity as it goes on. It's a kind of really useful device and kind of driving that message home. Again, I mentioned kind of vocal harmonies are kind of lush and absolutely brilliant. And again, back to what I was saying about that ending being, you know, just that ending in particular just feels like peak early 90s, noughties kind of punk rock.
It's a bit of heavy metal on that song as well, I would say. Just a little bit of heavy metal in the sort of way that Sum 41 used to infuse metal into their pop punk. Like, and a bit of grunge, like that chorus, you know, "I don't want to wait for you to calculate, I'm non-binary." It's got that almost discordant kind of grunge element to the melodies. And it's got a great shrieking kind of guitar solo in there as well, which is pretty fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Another kind of high point for me in the album was Binary Star, which for my money kind of felt like a love song. It kind of opens like an acoustic track. I felt as if it was kind of beautifully tender and evocative, especially with that kind of bridge around the kind of 2-minute mark, which I've described as being a huge kind of high point in the track. I think it's brilliantly executed. It's kind of prefaced by the introduction of some kind of distant strings there in the background before the rest of the band coming in, and it genuinely leaves you with kind of shivers down your spine. Like that's a beautiful song. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, the vocal performance, like while that's not my favourite song, the vocal performance on it is pretty astonishing, like it is on most of these tracks.
What other songs kind of stood out for you then, Snids?
I really like If I Was a Man. It's this anthemic protest song which lays bare the struggle for equality that women are still facing today, along with other sort of, gender minorities or non-binary people. And it's just a banger. Like, it's an absolute banger. It's got these rugged riffs, stomping drums, a rousing chorus that goes, "They wonder why we're bringing all the noise. It's because we're always taught that boys will be boys, and I can start to feel more overjoyed if I was a man, if I was a man." And it's that age-old shout to be heard and to be allowed to have the same experiences and to grow up being able to do what we want to do rather than be told you have to live a certain way because you have been assigned a certain gender. So another great song. Interestingly, the last song reminds me of Dashboard Confessional, which is a band I haven't thought about for a long time. And their song in particular, Hands Down, which was a favourite of mine back in the day. They don't sound like, don't get me wrong, these songs don't sound the same, but there are just these kind of certain musical and melodic cues that strike me as being similar. But then it's got a bit of a Bryan Adams Summer of '69 twist to the melody as well, which I thought was really interesting.
Aye, I mean, it's funny because so it's not me, it's you. Kind of feels, it kind of opens with this kind of Blink-182-esque. It felt kind of Blink-182-esque for me with the kind of opening guitar. But I kind of got some Spanish love song vibes as well.
Yeah,
again,
I mean,
couldn't quite put my finger on it, but as you said, there was certain cues that just kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah, I didn't actually think about Spanish love songs, but now that you mention it, there's definitely...
They kind of execute that kind of loud, quiet, loud dynamic between the kind of chorus quite well, that I'm always a kind of huge fan of, and kind of felt that the kind of bridge at the kind of 2-minute mark is a kind of real kind of foot stomper. I didn't get the kind of... Did you say Bryan Adams?
I did say Bryan Adams.
I didn't get that, but I'm not saying it's not in there.
There's definitely a sort of Summer of '69 melody in there, 100%. And it's that bit in the opening that you're mentioning, Blink-182, that guitar, that's the bit that reminds me of Hands Down by Dashboard Confessional.
Right,
specifically.
Okay.
But yeah, really enjoyable album. There's maybe the odd sort of, I was going to say low point, but I don't think it's as fair to say a low point. It's just bits that I don't like quite as much as some, because the highs are so high. There are elements that I don't like quite as much, but still a really solid album. And interestingly, I was going to mention this earlier, was that in their Spotify bio, they, let me just find the quote. They say they are a 3-piece band of muckers from Derry with some seriously infectious songwriting credentials. And that last bit, the seriously infectious songwriting credentials, I mean, after listening to this album, you cannot argue with that one bit. I wondered if that was a bit like self-aggrandizing when I first read that bit, but no, you can't argue with it.
Yeah, you're quite right. You're quite right. I thought it was a brilliant album. I keep going back to the vocal melodies, but they're brilliant. It's an album with a strong message. I think it delivers that message really well, but it delivers it without being overly kind of strident or in your face. And I think, as well as much as that it is important, I think you can enjoy the album just as a kind of straightforward kind of punk and alt album as well. I think it's a belter of a kind of debut album. And I'm kind of teetering teetering on a 9 or a 10, my man. Oh,
Which way will you fall?
I don't know.
You've got to decide. You've got to decide. I give it a 9. I've given every album a 9, but I think I'd give this a 9 as well. So there's an odd bit that I'm not quite so that I don't love quite as much, so that it's not quite a 10 out of 10 for me.
Okay,
but it is excellent.
Well, it is an excellent album, isn't it? I'm gutted. I'm gutted that I never realised about them. I never knew about them playing the Hug and Pint, because a phenomenal venue to see them. If they come round again, definitely have to make more of an effort to go and see them. Somewhere like the old Hairdressers or Stereo, something like that would just be lovely.
I think
upstairs at the old Hairdressers, where there's no stage.
It was all just the old on the floor.
Persian carpet. Somewhere like that would be great.
Yeah, I think
Persian rug.
Taking Out Sports would be amazing live. As with many of the songs from this album. Right, so that was... What was that? It was... Take It or Leave It by CHERYM. I forgot the name of the album there.
The internet's our church and tape is our savior. I'm opening my eyes to fucking inside.